Hello, I'm Gui,
I'm a fifth.
And I'm Long.
and you're listening to Kopi Overflow, a monthly podcast about software development. So, last episode we talked about pull request review, and we decided that the following up episode we want to talk about pair programming as an alternative approach in doing pull request review. I know that's great and all, but I'm not sure how talking about programming a fruit would help with that. Oh no, this joke didn't land well. This joke didn't land well.
Oh, pair. Okay, it's pair programming. Okay. Took a while.
I wouldn't have got it if you didn't bring it up.
I had to think really hard. I like jokes that make me think. It's okay. A for effort. No. It's good. It's good going. Don't worry.
I knew it's gonna bomb, and it's like it's gonna take a while.
Well, at least we got our pun for this episode, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if that counts as a pun.
It counts.
What would be a good introduction to pair programming for someone who doesn't know what pair programming is?
It's like two people in the kitchen.
That sounds chaotic.
It's like Overcooked, the game.
It can be chaotic for pair programming. Like you have to have a certain mindset in pair programming, right? When we talk about pair programming, usually the mindset is someone will be a driver, which means someone who's going to type all the code and stuff, and then the other one is going to be the navigator, which is doesn't do anything, just talk, give instructions, and because if you're not into this mindset and both of you guys want to actually do something on the code your way, it's going to become a chaotic kitchen to chef situation. If you both want to be the driver and put on your own ideas, then it's going to be a chaos. So you have to have this mindset where someone has to be a driver and someone has to be a navigator. So, and you have to be okay with whatever role. Sometimes you are more comfortable with becoming a driver, for example, but then sometimes you have to be navigator because someone else has to be driver, and you have to be okay with that.
I did want to say that your analogy might scare people who don't know what pair programming is. Chaotic? No, I'm not into that. But I kind of want to come back to that. Right? So as the name suggests, pair programming is you do programming in a pair. And Afif mentioned there's a driver and a navigator. So the driver usually in a non-pandemic world, if you're doing it in an office, the pair, both of the developers will share a screen, will only have one keyboard. So the driver will usually be the one doing the tactical work, which is using the keyboard and typing the code in. The navigator will be the one doing the more strategic work. You'll be the one discussing with the driver on like, okay, this is the thing we want to implement, how do we want to implement this, stuff like that. Or at least that's how I see it.
I think it's also good to bring up when someone being tactical and another one being strategic, it mostly apply when both the pair programmers are already familiar with their works. I think another situation that's also quite common is when someone somewhat senior pair with a new joiner, someone more junior, to help out the new junior or to do some sort of knowledge transfer as well. That's also a kind of pair programming. Does it count?
It is, yeah.
It's also like a chance to mentoring.
Yeah, it's a chance for mentoring. It's also not just among senior and juniors. I think it's also helpful when you have someone, for example, there's an existing project, but then there's a new team member. Both of them might be at the same level in terms of experience, but then you want to onboard someone to a new context, right? And pair programming also helps in that sense, that you have the existing engineer become the navigator, and then you have the new joiner to become the driver, so that the existing engineer can guide and the new joiner can absorb whatever instructions, contacts, or experience from the existing engineer.
It's not always mentoring of someone more experienced teaching someone less experienced. It's also a good chance for like someone who's new to the project, maybe can question some of the practices, status quo, like why are we doing this thing, maybe bringing a new perspective as well. I think that's also one of the benefits of pair programming.
Gui, why are you laughing?
Because I see it as like the inverse, right? The logic is the same with what both you, Afif, and Long mentioned, right? We want to share context. For example, someone who already is familiar with the code, running through it with someone together as a pair. In the end, it's all about context, right? Because if you're working on your own, especially if it's a new project or even a domain in a code base that you're not familiar with, and someone who is already familiar with kind of like quote unquote on board or run through, regardless as in whatever role they play, whether it's a driver or navigator, it will help drive discussion rather than alone working on the code base on whatever feature or bug fix you need to do. Then you kind of scope in on whatever that user story or that bug description says, right? Having someone else which may or may not have context, but at least to bounce around discussion and all would be a lot better. Well, I guess that drives home the point that doing pair programming helps in sharing context regardless of the exposure of the pair in the code base. I think we can talk about pre and post, or post. We're not end of the pandemic yet, but pre and current.
Do you want to say post-apocalypse?
It's not an apocalypse for sure, but we're not at the end of the pandemic yet. So, but yeah, like pairing in the same physical space and pairing remotely is definitely very different. We mentioned earlier, pairing in a physical place means both programmers would sit at one machine, one screen, and only someone navigating the keyboard, right? So in that sense, it's already physically limited to what this pair can do. I remember pairing with Afif when we were still working together. Not sure you remember the experience, but I think we were fixing a bug and then we were discussing on like what are the additional test cases we want to add. I think we wrote that all down and then I was like, oh, this is working already, let's refactor the code. Because I think we were just like trying to get it to work and make the test pass, and then like, okay, let's refactor that a bit. Any stories you all have when pairing in the same physical space?
One benefit of pairing physically is that both of you are engaged because both of you are on the same machine and only the driver is on the keyboard, right? When you do current situation where you are actually pairing remotely, so you also have access to your own machine, right? So, and like sometimes you kind of got distracted by what's on your computer rather than, focusing on what's on the other pair's machine. So that one needs some discipline when I had to do that more frequently. So sometimes you just get bugged by notifications and stuff, which doesn't help. Basically, the driver is just talking alone because you are out of the context for a while. Yeah, I feel bad about it. Yeah, but it does take some discipline. Just not touch the keyboard and really just focus on the driver. It's usually the navigator because the driver is working on the code, right? So it's doing tactical stuff, like real stuff. It's just you who's not doing anything rather than just talking. So yeah, that's one bad thing about remote pairing.
I think also it's interesting that you bring up the notification popping up, and there wouldn't be this situation when you were in the same physical space doing pairing. Usually other teammates would know that both of you are like focusing on something. They try not to bother you at least, and that's not the case when you're doing remotely. You might still get notification, people looking for you, asking questions in chat and whatnot because they don't know you are doing pair programming. That's somewhat of the difference between being in the same physical space and being remote. And also, I remember some of these funny moments when we were still in office where I always hear people complaining about other people's shortcut keys when we're doing pair programming because why your intelligent map this way? Yeah, why are you using nano in Git and whatnot? Those are complaints.
Like I can never use Afif's machine because of his Vim. I was like, you know what? It's my turn to drive. I'm gonna use my machine.
And that goes back to the initial point that I brought up about whether or not you are more comfortable being drivers or navigators. So for example, like I'm more comfortable being a driver, particularly because when I watch people on their keyboard and their editor, why are you not having shortcuts for all this common stuff?
You want to spread the gospel of Vim, right?
Yeah. I didn't want to, but when I look at people not using Vim, I'm like, oh my god, okay. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, but I do feel a difference. So if you can learn Vim, Please go and learn Vim.
See, he's doing that now.
Oh no, even during podcast. Something we forgot to brought up just now about pair programming is that I'm not sure what's a common scenario, but at least in my past experience, we tend to switch driver. I also tend to encourage that. Don't always have one person doing the driving because it's better to have perspective from both pair, right? So that's when all these funny shortcut complaints coming up when you switch drivers. Keyboards. I couldn't use these keyboards. I couldn't use Mac. I couldn't live in Linux or whatever.
Someone's keyboard layout might be different because he has like a gaming laptop or something.
Or US keyboard, Europe keyboard or whatever.
I remember one of my ex-colleagues had a very weird keyboard layout. He has a longer shift key or something. I can't remember what was it, but we were all complaining about his keyboard layout. I remember at one time. And yeah, I just couldn't really familiarize with his keyboard at the end.
Yeah, I definitely found that to be a problem. Then I decided on, look, we are going to switch the roles, like Long said, switch between driver and navigator. I will kind of set a Pomodoro, like, okay, let's do this setup of pairing for half an hour, then we take a break. When we're still in office, we get to like go make coffee or whatnot. And then when we get back, I will use my machine as a driver. Right?
Yeah. So the previous driver just push whatever code they have and then you continue from your machine, right?
Yeah. And some people can be very particular on like, you don't touch my machine. We had an ex-colleague where you can't touch their screen. A lot of people, when they point to a screen, they will point on the screen, right? And this very particular ex-colleague of ours will be like, don't touch the screen. Whenever like he sees the finger going near, like, don't touch the screen.
Oh, fun times.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to bring up, because Long you mentioned about notifications, I think Afi also talked about notifications. I think it's actually the same kind of discipline we have even when pairing physically. Because when we're pairing physically, let's say we have a phone next to us, right? If people send us a message, whatever app you have on your phone, even while physically pairing, we can like choose to ignore it. I think the same discipline applies pairing remotely as well. Notifications to me all are the same, regardless whether it's from like a personal messaging app or from a work messaging app. If it's notification, I will do not disturb or just choose to ignore it until the pairing is over. I don't want to say it's not a major complaint because I know people can find it hard to differentiate between these notifications, right? Between physically pairing and remote pairing, and maybe working remotely as well. There's certainly more notifications as long as the organization doesn't treat it as urgent and in some form or way they know that you're pairing. I think it's fine. I'm sorry if I'm going on a rant here, but it's the same if you're pairing physically, right? Let's say someone texts you and then you don't look at it while you're pairing and then you get back to them half an hour later. To me, that's kind of the same if in remote you're pairing and there's a notification coming and you only look at it after you're done pairing.
I wouldn't say there's no that kind of challenges when you're doing physically. It's just that it gets amplified when you do remotely. In terms of discipline itself, whether you are pairing or not, or when you work remotely, you kind of have to be a bit more disciplined yourself.
I would note that if you're pairing as, for example, a lead or a manager, at least for my experience, lead and managers are wired a bit different where notification is kind of something they want to get to almost immediately because it's usually a message from an engineer. Maybe they say, hey, we need to talk. It's like, oh no, they're going to talk to them now. Stuff like that, right? Like notifications are wired to be more urgent in managers, mostly because of the impact they have. So maybe if a lead or a manager is pairing with an engineer, it makes it harder to make a decision to ignore a notification. But I guess the same analogy applies. Let's say a manager or lead is pairing with an engineer. They will either like, oh, excuse me, I need to go and take a look at this. I think the same thing would apply if they feel a notification is urgent in a remote setting. One thing I do want to get back, Afif, was something you mentioned about when pairing remotely can get distracted as a navigator. So one bad practice I noticed I've been doing is, for example, the driver is looking at the code and then we're kind of discussing while they're typing, okay, we need to implement this here and there, and then I'll be navigating through the code base, oh, there's this other file, and then I will look at it as a navigator, then I'm like, oh, driver, we actually need to implement this and this file, so we need to hook it up here and there. As a developer, I want to be more helpful to my colleague, right? So we can kind of map out the thing. But at the same time, it's disrupting the flow because if we are pairing physically, I wouldn't be able to do that, right? Because there's only one machine. So I have to tell the driver to like, hey, can you check this file ABC so that we know where to hook this new thing in? When we're pairing remotely, I'm the one as the navigator doing it, checking file ABC. Oh, then I tell the driver, actually, we need to hook up to ABC because I'm saying this thing here and there. Yeah, maybe that's not very good. But I think we're all engineers, right? So we're trying to like optimize the best way.
I think that's not a bad suggestion at all. You're getting context while you're working on.
That's the thing, right? I don't feel it's very good It's not a suggestion. Because to me, it's like the navigator is being distracted. Like me as a navigator, I'm not even looking at the driver's screen. Right? I'm looking at the code base on my screen to like figure out things. Yeah, it's like, oh, the driver is doing this, so I'm gonna check this thing. But I say, if you're physically pairing, as a navigator, I won't be able to do this at all because there's only one screen and one keyboard, right? And the driver is the one doing this.
You would have to tell the driver to actually look at whatever files you wanted, right? And you guys will be looking at it together rather than.
But in your experience, does it really break the flow? I'm curious. Does it really break the flow? It doesn't feel like it's that disruptive.
Maybe I don't know because I'm pairing with someone who's new to pairing and I'm still trying to figure out. I don't know what's a good way to pair remotely, but this happened on one of my most recent pairing sessions where I'm pairing with this developer. We were basically implementing a new function across some domains and was looking at some of the other files that within a similar domain. Because if the driver is already concentrating on what they're doing and suddenly me as a navigator is like, hey, actually we need to implement this, it might be disruptive depending on the individual. You can argue that it's going to be disruptive as well if I tell the driver like, hey, we need to look at this. So I guess the driver will have to make a decision. I guess this is more around the physical pairing domain as well. The driver will have to make a decision. Do I entertain, quote unquote, the navigator now? Or it's like, hey, let us take a note. We'll look at that after I finish this.
It's not like it's going to break the flow. It's just that it doesn't reap the benefit of pairing fully, I guess. If you think about it, you want to have the driver to share the same context, right? So in the case of the navigator being a senior or someone who is existing engineer on the project, you want to have the driver to also be experienced in the whole code base. But then you do that behind the scene and not have the driver also look at those files that you know is needed. Driver will be like, oh, we have to implement this, but he doesn't see himself that we actually traveled through whatever files that you actually navigated to kind of get the same context of how things are connected together. So it's like you directly get the answer to a question rather than getting the way to solve it.
Right. Rather than figuring out the working, you straight away get the answer.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so I guess one thing I could improve on pairing remotely would be, hey driver, I think we need to look at this file. So can you like what will happen when we are physically pairing up? Because there's only one screen. Like the cost is so low for me to like look at my editor and like, I just take a quick look at this file.
That's the thing.
I'm trying to recall this experience, me as the driver during the pair programming session, and the navigator was browsing the other library that we use, and we are on the other project that used that library, and I was thinking, did we have these functions that we could reuse from that library? And then the navigator told me that, yeah, actually, I'm looking at a file that does this function that we can already use. We don't have to re-implement the wheel. Then I was like, oh yeah, is it this? What's the name? And then I'll just go to the path and then go. I felt like that's actually quite beneficial. Is there a downside to that?
You both are probably on the same level in terms of context for that project. Is it? Yeah, so if the navigator is someone new, then he wouldn't have that, I guess, that context.
And you were asking for a very specific question, right? Did our library have this function or not? The answer comes back to, it depends.
The answer to everything. 42 and it depends.
This is a tangent, but the way I try to manage my attention these days when I'm working remotely or when I'm pairing is I try to use apps that actually totally block my phone. So there's an app called Forest on Android. I think our iPhone also has it. That actually just lets you block your phone within a certain period of time. So at least you can manage your attention well. There's also a Forest desktop app, but I haven't tried that. I don't want it to block my whole desktop because I still need to see the screen of my pair. But so I'm not sure whether or not they will give me control of what is allowed. I'm yet to try that, but I should probably try that.
It sounds like a spyware though, like so scary. They block your entire desktop.
And then suddenly ask for Bitcoin.
Forrest, if you're listening, please sponsor us. I looked at the company as well. I think they're legit. They're legit. So
Yeah, they're legit. It has been very helpful, to be honest. They really play with your psychology very well. If you are having problems with attention, Forest is a very good app.
comes back to the kind of the notification thing as well. Right? So even if you get a notification for us, whatever app that does this, focus app. So this sort of focus app will help you manage notifications as well. Like, oh, there's a notification, but there's this focus app. Okay, I'll look at it later. When starting a pair, like I mentioned, you can always set a Pomodoro timer. Right, let's pair for 20 minutes. Then we take a break, and then you can like go through all your notifications and whatnot.
We keep coming back to these notification topics around pair programming. I feel like notification from phone is never a problem for me. It's easy to silence, right? What bothers me more is like notification from your teammates, close teammates. Like let's say you're a team of 6-7 people, and then like two of you are pairing, and one of the teammate needs help from you, but the other teammate didn't know two of you are pairing on something. The notification comes out, and then you sort of need to attend like, hey, could you help me with this CI/CD access or whatever. You don't want to like go back to those kind of notifications 30 minutes or 1 hour later because maybe you're blocking someone. And that usually not an issue in the physical space, but where people would know and people could determine if it's worth to break this pair programming flows or is it urgent enough. But usually when we're remote, there's not such a signal to tell whether you should bother people who are on focusing on pair programming. So I think like those kind of notification is more distracting than any other kind of notifications.
I would argue the same would happen for physical pairing. People walk over or they're pairing, but I really need this urgent thing really quick. Can I have 5 minutes of your time? I know some organizations invest in like hardware where there's like a lamp next to the monitor. So I think it's a traffic light lamp. So if it's green color means they're not pairing. If it's red color means they're pairing, something like that. So if you see it's red color, you ignore it.
Wait, companies have that?
I know some companies actually, when pre-pandemic, they have like all these things and you can set your status in an app. You will show the light. Not very bright, of course. It will obviously annoy a lot of people, but it's just good enough people can see. It's like, okay, you're not available. I would say more progressive companies do this because some companies wouldn't care, right? And it's just like, just disturb them. But I guess a lot of these, like, it requires a more organizational solution, right? For example, like along the example you gave up, just very specific to that example, like someone needs access or anything. If there's a bottleneck in a team, means something is wrong, at least to me. I'm not going to go into all this very, very deep dive lah. But yeah, there's all this more organizational level or team level discussion and solutions around this. But I guess the easiest way is to like treat pairing as like blocking the calendar already. It's like a meeting, right? So don't disturb this meeting.
People won't check your calendar before talking to you, right? But I guess like this is something you can really solve with those messenger status, like Workplace, Discord, Slack, whatever. Like you can just update your status to doing pair programmings.
I guess in your situation, you will go back to the mantra of remote communication. Don't expect response right away. If you shoot something, then don't expect to echo back something.
Asynchronous communication, and also something we just recently talked about is no hello. Three of us recently talked about this. You know, when people reach out to you and they just say hello without giving you context, and sometimes I look at this message, it's like, how can I help you? So this was a scenario I gave, right? The counter scenario I gave. Imagine your boss messaged you, your manager messaged you just with a hello. It doesn't give you context. What are you going to think? What's the first thought that's going to cross your mind? Am I getting fired?
What? Really?
I mean, worst case, right? It would be good in your communication to like, hello, I need help with this, or I'm reaching out because of this. I think long you share about nohello.net.
Yeah, that's a website. Recently we have like a open office Discord channels that we're trying in my team. One of the things you could do is you can have voice channels, right, in Discord. So we can have a pairing room channel. So you could see like whoever in the pairing room, you know that they are in pairing, you expect not to get their response immediately. So that also creates signals other than the messenger status.
This is the thing, right? We are so like startup-ish. Like the companies I've worked in, at least in software development, are all very startup-ish. I haven't worked in a place that use Microsoft Teams, so I don't know like whether Microsoft Teams actually provides this. Actually, even Zoom doesn't do this too well. Zoom has breakout rooms, right? Not everybody can see who are in the breakout rooms and that sort of thing, right? Maybe Discord is a better enterprise communication tool. Just saying.
Discord, please sponsor us.
Discord, please sponsor us. We're using Discord.
Give us a server boost or something.
So I mentioned earlier, I was pairing with a colleague that never had any experience pairing at all, which kind of surprised me as well. I didn't took the assumption. I asked this colleague of mine, hey, have you ever done pairing? And then they said no. I expected a yes, but they said no. It's like, okay, how do I explain pairing and all? One of the question, I guess, I kind of want both of your opinion is, how do we start off someone? Okay, we talked about the introduction, what is pairing and all, but what would be like good things to start with for someone new to pairing? We talk about driver and navigator. We roughly talked about what they are doing in actual practice. What will be a good way? Because one thing I try to do with this colleague of mine who didn't know how to pair was like, okay, I'll be the driver first because they don't have a notion what pairing is. I don't want them to be stressed on like, oh, suddenly all the attention is on me. Someone is backseat programming. Is that a term? Like backseat gaming? Backseat programming me. So I was like, I'll be the driver. So you as a navigator, you can do this and that. And I gave like a long introduction, but I'm not sure any of you have like context or advice to give for people who are new towards this. I know we've shifted from like introduction and then practices and all that we're doing, but what about this, like for people totally new?
I would probably do the other way around. Like I'll probably make them become driver. Wait, so it depends. Are they not experienced in pair programming but has context on the project, or they are totally new engineer and then also new to pairing? So if they already have context of the project, they are an existing engineer, they just need to start pairing, then probably yes, I can probably become the driver first and then let them become navigator. If they are totally new, then I don't think they're gonna be doing anything if they're becoming navigator, because they don't know the whole context enough to navigate you. So it will be just you driving and navigating and telling the other guy. It's like a YouTube tutorial, something like that. So
Now that they mentioned, yeah, that's kind of my experience. Like, when I was driving, I was kind of explaining, okay, these are the classes that do this and this. So maybe you can check on these other things. It would be better if I was in the navigator role then. But clearly on mine to drive, then I would tell him, then he will open up the file as a driver, then we can go through it. That would be a better experience, I guess.
yeah, I think they will commit to memory a bit better if they actually do hands-on navigating. But then again, if they are just new to pairing and not the project itself, then I probably will be okay with any role to start with.
You could have the new joiner play Overcooked with you for 15 minutes first. Anyway,
How would
not helping. Overcooked.
we should build a game called Overcode.
Overcooked.
For those of you who don't know, Overcooked is a game. Basically, you have a kitchen and you can play with your friends in cooperative mode where you can kind of manage the whole kitchen together, basically. So somebody will be chopping stuff and then somebody will be cooking stuff. And I wanted to say it's not really a direct parallel to pair programming in software development, I would say, because in Overcooked, it will be different people doing different tasks in the same kitchen. In software development, you always try to complete one task. It's just that you're doing it with other people.
Afif, even though you say that, I feel that there are organizations out there who run their software teams like how we will yell at each other and overcome.
Throw me the mushroom.
Those people will not fare well in playing Overcooked.
It's like CI/CD's on fire. It's okay. We don't need tests. Just deploy.
Let QA write tests, right? So you're just chopping stuff here. You just pass everything to QA to do the cooking.
I don't mean Overcooked is exactly like pair programming, but in a way that the thing about pair programming, you need to let, I guess, someone who's new to pair programming know is we're working on the same goal. We are not multitasking here. You are not chopping stuff all the way and I'm not boiling the soup all the time. That's the first thing to establish. We're working on the same goal. We are not doing the have 2 person to deliver a baby in 4 months because one person requires 9 months. I don't have experience having someone who's like very experienced coding but new to pair programming. I had experienced someone who's new to both coding and pair programming, right? So when we start pairing, when I'm a driver, I would do things like I would stop and ask questions about how we're gonna go about this so that I can implement, even though I probably have some rough idea, so that I will make the navigator think about it. And then if I'm a navigator, I would say something like, this is a strategy that I think we can go with. And then we'll ask for opinions from the driver to see if there's something feasible that we can implement to set the tactical mindset, I guess. That sort of help a bit in a way for someone who's new to pair programming. And then as time goes by, I feel like I managed to get that new joiner to get more familiar with pair programming. Even though I don't exactly say the phrase, you're the driver, I'm the navigator, you do this and I do that. I think that's more organic to just influence it that way. That's my experience.
One thing I definitely want to build on is the analogy you gave about the pregnancy thing. A lot of organizations will be like, why do you need two people to do one person's job? That sort of thing. Like more traditional, quote unquote, companies who see people as resources and like, why do you need two people to do this? Maybe it's something we can discuss in the future, especially if we talk about deadlines and stuff like that. But yeah, I think we're almost time. But I feel this was a very, very good discussion. I think we covered like a huge range between like people who have experience pairing and for us talking about focus app and notifications. And shout out to a lot of companies that would like to sponsor us. Thank you, please. But before we end, any closing remarks regarding pair programming?
One thing that I wanted to go in is the mental toll if you're a socially awkward person, I guess. I am personally someone who's, after I socialize for a while, I need to really take a break. It really drains me. So socializing is something draining for me. And because pairing is socializing, it drains me. That's why you have to be aware of this mental toll and really take a break. So I've had instances where I was pairing for I think 3 or 4 months straight. Those period of time I was dragging my feet to work basically because I didn't have enough alone time to kind of energize, basically just regain myself, I would say. Yeah, so that's one part that we probably didn't get to. But I think all the suggestions that we gave, like all the Pomodoro techniques, take a break after half an hour or switch roles. So for example, like I'm more comfortable in the driver role. Make sure you don't just do one role because it's going to be really draining if you're just doing one role. If it's not draining for you, it's probably draining for the other person. That's my closing remark.
A lot of the time, like we, at least from where my experience is, we sort of treat pair programming as the next step when we're stuck on certain ticket when we're working alone, and then like, hey, can you jump in and so that we can pair on this ticket since I'm stuck working alone after a while. Maybe a lot of people would treat that as we will definitely find a solution when we pair program, but that's not always the case. Maybe it's something else about that's blocking the ticket from being completed. Even you pair program doesn't mean you'll be able to close the ticket immediately. Maybe you can discover more signal what went wrong, what's lacking, maybe it's missing some requirements, or it's a ticket that's just not feasible. Then you could close the ticket as, I don't know, undo later, reopened. Even after your pair, it doesn't have to feel like a defeat.
Yeah, I think that's a good note to end on. Right, follow us on Twitter, Kopi Overflow. We are on all major podcast platforms. That includes Spotify. Now, every time to make sure I say Spotify correctly. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and...
Don't let your copy overflow.
Yay.
Yay.
Thank you.
Right, thank you.